The autumn air carried a hint of fog as Sofia Martinez pulled up to her gallery in her modest Honda Civic. She'd never been one for flashy cars, even after her success. The fog wrapped around the streetlights like silk scarves, creating halos that reminded her of that day 5 years ago. The day she stood alone in her wedding dress, mascara running down her cheeks, holding a brief note that simply read, "I can't. I'm sorry." Today was different though. Her gallery, Art Space Revolution, was hosting its biggest opening of the season. The last 5 years had transformed her from the shy art curator who once dreamed of love into one of San Francisco's most respected gallery owners. Her phone buzzed with messages from her assistant about final preparations for tonight's show, but Sofia's mind wandered to her morning ritual, checking the business section of the San Francisco Chronicle. There it was, splashed across the digital headlines. Tech billionaire Alexander Blackwood returns to Bay Area after 5-year absence. Her coffee nearly slipped from her grasp. The photo showed him stepping off his private jet, looking even more handsome than she remembered. His dark hair had touches of silver at the temples now, but his eyes still held that same intensity that had once made her weak in the knees. Sofia's assistant, May, rushed up as soon as she entered the gallery. "The lighting team is here, and the caterers want to know about the placement of the champagne stations." She paused, noticing Sofia's pale face. "Aren't you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Sofia murmured, straightening her blazer. She'd worked too hard to let his return affect her. The gallery was her sanctuary now, filled with the dreams and visions of artists she'd carefully curated over the years. Each success had been a brick in the wall she built around her heart. The day passed in a blur of preparations. By evening, the gallery was transformed. The lighting cast perfect shadows across the contemporary sculptures, and the paintings seemed to glow from within. Sofia wore a simple black dress that made her feel both powerful and elegant. Her dark hair was swept up in a sophisticated twist, and she wore the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for luck. The opening was in full swing when she felt it, that familiar electricity in the air. The crowd near the entrance parted like the Red Sea, and there he stood. Alexander Blackwood, in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, looking as if he'd stepped out of her memories. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. He took a step toward her, and memories flooded back. Their first meeting at a charity auction, late-night conversations about art and dreams, the way he proposed under the stars at Land's End. But with those sweet memories came the bitter ones, the empty church, the pitying looks, the nights spent crying herself to sleep. Sofia did the only thing she could do. She turned away, glass of champagne steady in her hand, and walked toward a group of art collectors discussing the newest installation. Her voice didn't shake as she joined their conversation, explaining the artist's vision with perfect composure. But inside, her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Throughout the evening, she could feel his eyes following her. He tried several times to make his way to her, but she was always one step ahead, slipping away into another conversation, another room, another group of admirers. It was a dance they performed across the gallery floor, him pursuing, her evading. Near the end of the night, she finally found herself alone in the back office, needing a moment to breathe. Through the cracked door, she heard his voice for the first time in 5 years, asking Mai where she was. Sofia's assistant, loyal to the core, replied that she'd left for the evening. As she listened to his footsteps fade away, Sofia sank into her chair, her carefully maintained composure cracking. On her desk sat a small framed photo she kept hidden in a drawer, the two of them at Ocean Beach, laughing as the wind messed up their hair. She used to look at it every day, but now it only came out on her weakest moments. "Why now?" she whispered to the empty room. "Why come back now when I'm finally okay?" But deep down, she knew she wasn't as okay as she pretended to be. The wall she built around her heart had a crack in it now, and through that crack seeped all the questions she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Outside, the fog had grown thicker, wrapping the city in its mysterious embrace. Sophie had gathered her things, ready to head home to her quiet apartment. As she walked to her car, she couldn't help but look over her shoulder, half expecting to see him there. The street was empty, but somehow she knew this was just the beginning. Alexander Blackwood hadn't come back to San Francisco just for business, and sooner or later she would have to face him, and all the unspoken words between them. 2 weeks after the gallery opening, Sophia sat in her favorite coffee shop, the one with mismatched chairs and the smell of freshly baked cookies. Her laptop was open to an email from her biggest client, but her mind kept drifting to the newspaper sitting beside her coffee cup. Alexander's face was there again, this time announcing a major tech investment in the city's art district. Just a coincidence, she muttered, but even she didn't believe it anymore. Nothing Alexander Blackwood did was ever a coincidence. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The corner table at Golden Gate Bakery. 20 minutes. I owe you the truth. She knew who it was without asking. That was their spot, where they'd shared their first real conversation over egg tarts and jasmine tea. Her fingers hovered over the phone, ready to type a firm no. Instead, she found herself packing up her things. The bakery looked exactly the same, right down to the faded red awning and the little bell above the door. Alexander was already there, 2 egg tarts and 2 cups of tea on the table. He'd remembered. Of course he had. You came, he said softly, standing as she approached. He looked different in casual clothes, a simple blue sweater and jeans, more like the man she'd fallen in love with than the billionaire from the newspapers. I almost didn't, she replied, sitting down but leaving her coat on. Ready to leave at any moment. You have 15 minutes. He pushed one of the egg tarts toward her. Remember how we met here? You were sketching in that little black notebook you always carried. I remember everything, she cut him off, including how it ended. 14 minutes now. Alexander's face fell, and for the first time she noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands couldn't quite stay still. What I'm about to tell you, I should have told you 5 years ago. I was trying to protect you, but I realize now I only hurt you more. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside were printouts of emails, photos, and what looked like security reports. As Sophia read through them, her hands began to shake. There were surveillance photos of her, leaving her old apartment, walking to work, having dinner with friends. And messages, threatening messages, all sent the morning of their wedding day. Walk away, or she dies. You really think you can protect her? Choose the wedding or her life. These came an hour before the ceremony, Alexander said quietly, along with proof that someone had broken into your apartment while you were staying at your mom's place. They'd left nothing but a black rose on your pillow. They wanted me to know they could get to you anytime. Sophia's throat felt dry. Who? Remember those tech patents I was working on? Turned out some very powerful people wanted them. They'd already tried to hack our servers to steal our research. When that didn't work, he gestured at the photos. They found my weakness. You. So you left, Sophia said, her voice barely a whisper, without a word, without trusting me enough to tell me. They were watching. If I'd told you, if I'd given any hint that I was leaving to protect you, I couldn't risk it. So I made you hate me instead. Better hating me then. He couldn't finish the sentence. Sophia stayed out the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. Normal people living normal lives, not caught up in corporate espionage and threats. What changed? Why come back now? We finally found them. It took 5 years, but we traced everything back to a rival tech company. They've been exposed. Their CEO is facing criminal charges. It's over. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. I never stopped loving you, Sophia. Not for a single day. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't get to say that. Not after 5 years. You made a choice, Alexander. You decided what was best for me without giving me a voice. You took away my right to choose. Sophia, please. No. She gathered the envelope of evidence, her hands surprisingly steady now. Thank you for telling me the truth. Finally. But if you really loved me, you would have trusted me enough to face this together. As she walked out of the bakery, the little bell chiming behind her, Sophia felt something she hadn't expected. Anger. Not the hurt and confusion that had haunted her for 5 years, but pure, clarifying anger. He had tried to protect her by taking away her agency, her choice, her right to fight for their love. Back in her car, she looked at the envelope in her passenger seat. The truth had finally emerged, but instead of bringing closure, it opened up new wounds. He had loved her enough to walk away, but not enough to let her decide her own fate. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Alexander. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but please give me a chance to make it right. Sophia started her car, watching the fog roll in from the bay. The truth was out now, but it wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something new, something that would force both of them to confront not just what was lost, but what it truly means to love someone enough to let them make their own choices. Sophia stepped into her penthouse apartment, kicking off her heels and letting out a long breath. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a view she'd earned through years of hard work. 5 years of building something entirely her own, brick by brick, painting by painting. Her phone buzzed for the 100th time that day, another message from Alexander. She'd been ignoring them since their meeting at the bakery 3 days ago. Instead, she picked up the framed photo on her coffee table, her and Dr. Thomas Chen at last month's charity gala. He was everything she thought she needed now. Stable, honest, predictable. The opposite of Alexander. You're overthinking again, came a voice from her kitchen. Her younger sister Rita was there, helping herself to leftover pasta. I can hear your brain from here. Sophia smiled despite herself. Rita had been her rock during those dark days after Alexander left, showing up with ice cream and terrible movies, refusing to let her sister drown in sorrow. Just tired from work, she lied. Uh-huh. Rita plopped down on the couch. And it has nothing to do with a certain billionaire's face being plastered all over the city. Thomas called me, you know. Says you've been distracted lately. Sophia sighed, joining her sister on the couch. I got the truth finally. About why Alexander left. She told Rita everything. The threats, the photos, his misguided attempt at protection. What a stupid man, Rita declared when Sophia finished. Brilliant with computers, totally clueless about love. Thomas would never do something like that, Sophia said, more to herself than her sister. He tells me everything. His work at the children's hospital, his plans for the future, even what he had for lunch. And does that make your heart race? Does it keep you up at night thinking about him? Rita's voice was gentle now. Sis, you've spent 5 years building the perfect safe life. The gallery's amazing, you're engaged to the nicest guy in San Francisco, and your closet is filled with designer shoes you actually paid for yourself. But I haven't seen that spark in your eye since. Don't, Sophia warned. Alexander made his choice. To protect you. To control me. Sophia stood up pacing. He decided what was best for me without even giving me a chance to fight back. And now he's everywhere. At every gallery event, every charity function. Yesterday, he bought the building across from my gallery. Rita raised an eyebrow. The old warehouse. I thought you wanted to expand there. I did. I've been saving for it. And now, Sophia collapsed back onto the couch. Now he's probably going to turn it into some tech hub. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Thomas. Dinner tomorrow? Have exciting news about the hospital's new wing. Sophia stared at the message. Thomas was a good man. He'd never leave her wondering, never make unilateral decisions about their life together. But Rita was right. He'd never made her heart race either. The doorbell rang, making both sisters jump. Rita got up to answer it, returning with a large package. Special delivery, she said, her eyes wide. Inside was Sophia's old sketchbook, the one she'd left behind in their apartment when Alexander disappeared. She'd forgotten about it until now. The pages were filled with her drawings, street scenes, quick sketches of gallery visitors, and dozens of Alexander. Alexander laughing, Alexander lost in thought over his computer, Alexander sleeping peacefully beside her. Tucked inside was a note. I kept this safe, hoping one day I could return it. Every time I felt weak, ready to come back before it was safe, I'd look at your drawings and remember what I was protecting. I was wrong, Sophia. I should have protected us, not just you. Well, Rita said, peering over her shoulder, at least he finally gets it. Sophia touched one of the sketches gently, a drawing of Alexander's hands as he worked, the details still perfect after all these years. She'd captured the tiny scar on his right thumb, the way his fingers moved over the keyboard like a pianist's. Thomas wants to have dinner tomorrow, Sophia said quietly. He has news about the hospital. Rita squeezed her shoulder. And what do you want? Sophia looked around her carefully curated apartment, the expensive art on the walls, the perfectly arranged furniture, the life she'd built to prove she didn't need anyone. It was also safe. She thought about the warehouse across from her gallery, about Alexander buying it, about Thomas and his predictable messages. I want, she started, then stopped. What did she want? The safe harbor of Thomas's love? Or the stormy seas that came with Alexander, who could hurt her like no one else, but also make her feel more alive than anyone ever had? Her phone buzzed one more time. Alexander again. The warehouse is yours if you want it. No strings attached. It was always meant to be part of your gallery. I just got there first to keep anyone else from taking it. Consider it 5 years' worth of apology interest. Sophia laughed despite herself, a real laugh that made Rita smile. There he is, her sister said softly. The man who still knows exactly how to reach your heart. Looking out at the city lights, Sophia realized she had another choice to make. She could keep building her safe, predictable life with Thomas, or she could risk everything again. The warehouse message wasn't really about the building. It was Alexander's way of saying he remembered her dreams, even after all this time. I have to call Thomas, she said finally. He deserves to hear the truth from me, not at some charity event. Rita hugged her tightly. The truth being, Sophia looked down at her sketchbook, at all the moments she'd captured of a love she thought was lost forever. The truth is, I never really moved on. I just got better at pretending I had. Rain pattered against the gallery windows as Sophia sat alone in her office, staring at her engagement ring. The conversation with Thomas had been exactly what she expected, kind, understanding, and heartbreaking in its gentleness. I always knew, he'd said softly, that I was loving someone who couldn't fully love me back. The sound of the gallery's front door opening pulled her from her thoughts. She'd forgotten to lock up after closing. We're closed, she called out, gathering her things. I know, Alexander's voice echoed through the empty space. But we need to talk. Sophia stepped out of her office to find him standing in the middle of her latest exhibition, Shadows and Light, his clothes dripping from the rain. He looked different somehow, more vulnerable than the powerful tech billionaire the world knew. You're getting water on my floor, she said, but handed him a clean cloth she used for dusting frames. I saw Thomas today, he said, running the cloth over his face. At the hospital, he told me about your conversation. Sophia's heart skipped. You went to see him. I needed to apologize for disrupting his life, your life. Alexander moved closer, his shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. He said something that made me think. He said you never looked at him the way you used to look at me, like I held all the answers to questions you hadn't even thought to ask yet. Thomas is very observant, Sophia replied, moving to adjust a painting that was perfectly straight. He's also very kind. More than either of us deserve. Sophia. Alexander reached for her hand, but she stepped back. No, you don't get to just walk back into my life and expect everything to fall into place. Do you know what it was like? Planning our wedding, picking out china patterns, dreaming about our future, and then, her voice cracked, standing there in that church waiting. My father kept saying, he's just running late. But I knew. Something in my heart knew you weren't coming. I drove to the church, Alexander admitted quietly. I parked across the street, watched you arrive in your car, saw how beautiful you looked through the windows. The note with the threats was in my pocket. I thought I was being strong by walking away. I was wrong. I was a coward. Sophia laughed bitterly. A coward? You faced down corporate spies and threats, built a tech empire, and became a billionaire. But you couldn't trust me enough to fight beside you. I couldn't bear the thought of you getting hurt because of me. His voice rose, echoing off the gallery walls. Those people, they weren't just making empty threats. They'd already broken into your apartment. What if next time? That wasn't your choice to make. Sophia shouted back, her composure finally breaking. You took away my right to choose. My right to stand by you, to face whatever came our way together. You didn't just leave me at the altar, Alexander. You took away my voice. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the rain had gotten heavier, drumming against the skylights. In the dim gallery lighting, their shadows stretched long across the floor, almost touching. You're right, he said finally. I was so focused on protecting you that I forgot to respect you, to trust in your strength. These past 5 years, watching you from afar, seeing everything you've built. You never needed my protection. You needed my partnership." Sophia felt tears running down her cheeks, but didn't bother wiping them away. "I would have fought the whole world with you, Alex. All you had to do was ask." He moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "And now? Would you fight with me now?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. An email notification, photographs of her and Alexander through the gallery windows, taken just minutes ago. The message below read, "History repeats itself. Walk away, or this time you both pay." Alexander's phone buzzed too. Same message, same photos. Their eyes met in the dim gallery light. This time, there was no hesitation in Alexander's voice when he said, "We need to deal with this. Together, if you want to." Sophia looked at the threatening message, then at the man she'd loved and lost and maybe found again. 5 years ago, he'd made this choice for her. Now, standing in the gallery she'd built from her broken dreams, she had the chance to make it for herself. "Together," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "But this time, we do it my way." Alexander's face broke into that familiar smile she'd tried so hard to forget. "Your way was always better than mine anyway." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside the gallery, surrounded by art and shadows and years of unspoken words, something broken began to heal. The threat on their phones was real, dangerous, and terrifying. But this time, they would face it the way they should have faced everything, not as protector and protected, but as equals, partners, two halves of a whole that had been too long divided. Sophia touched the empty space on her finger where Thomas's ring had been. "I don't trust you completely," she said honestly. "Not yet." "I know," Alexander replied. "But I'm hoping you'll let me earn it back. Day by day, truth by truth." Another photo arrived on their phones, this one of them standing together in the gallery right now. Whoever was watching them was close, very close. Sophia straightened her shoulders, a plan already forming in her mind. "Well then," she said, "let's give them something worth watching." Sophia's gallery had become their command center. 3 days had passed since the threatening messages began, and the space that usually displayed beautiful artwork now had boards covered with photos, timelines, and connections. Her sister Rita had insisted on staying with their parents after Sophia told her about the threats, something Sophia was grateful for. "The photos are being sent from different locations around the city," Alexander said, pointing to a map they'd created. He'd shed his usual suit jacket, his sleeves rolled up as they worked. "But there's a pattern. They're all within a 5-block radius of either your gallery or my office." Sophia stood at the window, watching people pass by on the street below. Anyone could be watching them. The timing can't be a coincidence. You come back, reveal the truth about the past threats, and suddenly they start again. "I've made some enemies over the past 5 years," Alexander admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "The tech world isn't always as clean as it appears in the press releases." A knock at the gallery door made them both jump. It was Mrs. Wu from the Chinese restaurant next door, holding up a bag of food. Sophia had given her a key for deliveries years ago. "You two work too hard," the older woman scolded, setting out containers of noodles and dumplings. "Young love needs food to grow strong again." Sophia blushed, but Mrs. Wu just winked and left them alone. The familiar smell of their favorite dishes filled the air. The same restaurant they'd ordered from during late nights working on Alexander's first app, back when he was just a dreamer with a laptop and she was an art student with big plans. "Remember that night we stayed up until dawn?" Alexander asked, opening a container of dumplings. "When we finally cracked the code for the security system." Sophia smiled despite herself. "You fell asleep on my shoulder, drooling on my favorite sweater." It was a very comfortable shoulder. Their eyes met across the takeout containers, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. Then Sophia's phone buzzed with another photo, this one of Mrs. Wu leaving the gallery. The message read, "Such a sweet old lady. Shame if something happened to her shop." "No," Sophia said firmly, showing Alexander the message. "They don't get to threaten innocent people." Alexander's face hardened. "I might know who's behind this. There's a tech company, Rising Sun Technologies. They've been trying to replicate my security software for years. Last month, I blocked their attempt to acquire a smaller company that had similar technology." Rising sun. Sophia walked to one of their boards. Wait a minute. She pulled up an old email on her laptop. They tried to buy artwork from my gallery last week. Offered way above market price for pieces that weren't even for sale. Alexander moved to look at the email. The CEO is David Chan. He was involved with the threats 5 years ago, but we could never prove it. He must have found out I was coming back to San Francisco. So he's trying to pressure both of us now? Sophia started pacing, her mind racing. The art purchases, the photos, the threats, it's all connected. A crash from outside made them both freeze. Through the gallery windows, they could see smoke rising from Mrs. Wu's restaurant. The sound of fire engines filled the air. This is my fault, Sophia whispered, watching firefighters arrive. They're targeting everyone around us. Alexander pulled her close, and for once she didn't resist. No, it's their fault, and we're going to stop them. Sophia pulled back, her eyes fierce. I have an idea, but it's risky. I'm listening. Rising Sun wants to buy out from my gallery. Let's give them what they want. My next exhibition opens in 3 days. We'll let it slip that I'm displaying some previously unseen pieces that might interest certain tech companies. Alexander's eyes widened as he caught on. You want to set a trap. You have proof of their involvement from 5 years ago, right? And I have the emails showing their suspicious interest in my gallery. If we can get them to show their hand at the exhibition. It's dangerous, Alexander warned. These people don't play nice. Sophia gestured at the smoke still rising from Mrs. Wu's restaurant. Neither do I, not anymore. They tried to break us once by keeping us apart. Now they'll learn what happens when we work together. Alexander pulled out his phone. I'll call my security team. We'll need to wire the whole gallery. No, Sophia said firmly. We do this smart. Too much security will tip them off. I know every inch of this gallery, every hidden corner. And I know art people, what they'll notice and what they won't. They worked through the night, planning their trap. Sophia created a false catalogue of artwork with hidden meanings in the descriptions, meanings that would only make sense to someone looking for tech secrets. Alexander set up discreet surveillance equipment that looked like part of the gallery's lighting system. As dawn broke, they stood looking at their work. The gallery looked normal to anyone passing by, but it was now a carefully laid trap. What if something goes wrong? Alexander asked softly. Sophia took his hand, squeezing it gently. Then we'll handle it together. That's what partners do, right? He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. Partners, he agreed. Outside, the fire damage at Mrs. Wu's restaurant was being cleaned up. Sophia had already arranged for the repairs, refusing to let an innocent person suffer for their fight. The sunrise painted the city in shades of pink and gold, a new day beginning. 3 days, Sophia said, watching the city wake up. 3 days until we end this, one way or another. Alexander nodded, his hand still in hers. They both knew the risk they were taking, but also knew they couldn't keep living under these threats. 5 years ago, fear had torn them apart. Now, it was bringing them back together, stronger than before. Mrs. Wu appeared at her damaged storefront, already sweeping up broken glass. Sophia watched her with determination. Sometimes, the biggest acts of love weren't grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. Sometimes, they were simply standing together, facing whatever came your way, protecting not just each other, but everyone around you. We should get some sleep, Alexander suggested. Big days ahead. Sophia nodded, but neither of them moved. In the quiet morning light, surrounded by art and plans and possibilities, they stood together, ready to face whatever came next. Not as protector and protected, but as equals in a fight that had been a long time coming. The night of the exhibition arrived with an electric tension in the air. Sophia stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down her red dress, a bold choice for a bold plan. The gallery had been transformed, looking more elegant than ever with its strategic lighting and carefully placed artwork. You look beautiful, Rita said from the doorway of Sophia's office. Like a warrior going into battle. That's exactly what this is, Sophia replied, checking her earpiece one last time. It was tiny, nearly invisible, connecting her to Alexander and their small security team hidden throughout the gallery. The first guests began arriving at 8. Sophia played her part perfectly, the gracious gallery owner, discussing art values and investment potential. She could feel Alexander watching her from his position near the back, dressed in an impeccable suit that helped him blend in with the wealthy collectors. Movement at the east entrance. His voice came through her earpiece. Chang just arrived with 2 associates. Sophia turned to see David Chang, CEO of Rising Sun Technologies, making his entrance. He was shorter than she'd expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He headed straight for her. "Ms. Martinez," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about your gallery. Particularly interested in the new pieces you're unveiling tonight." Sophia shook his hand, noting how cold his fingers felt. "Mr. Chang, what a pleasure. I wasn't aware you were an art collector." "Oh, I appreciate all forms of intellectual property." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Especially pieces that might hold hidden value." Through her earpiece, she heard Alexander's sharp intake of breath. They'd baited the trap with artwork descriptions that hinted at encrypted tech secrets, and Chang had taken the bait. "Perhaps you'd like a private viewing of our special collection," Sophia suggested, leading him toward a secluded corner of the gallery. "We keep our most intriguing pieces away from the main floor." As they walked, Sophia noticed Chang's associates spreading out through the gallery. One positioned himself near the main exit, another by the emergency door. They thought they were being subtle, but Alexander's security team was tracking their every move. The hidden room was actually Sophia's restored storage space filled with carefully selected pieces. Each artwork contained subtle references to Alexander's security technology, references that would only make sense to someone specifically looking for them. "Fascinating collection," Chang said, studying a particularly complex abstract painting. "The patterns here, they remind me of certain coding sequences." "You have a good eye," Sophia replied, watching him closely. "Many collectors miss the deeper meanings in abstract work." Chang turned to her, dropping his pleasant facade. "Let's stop playing games, Ms. Martinez. We both know what's really hidden in these paintings. Give me access to the full collection, and all your recent problems will disappear." "Problems?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Like the fire at Mrs. Wu's restaurant." "Accidents happen in this city all the time." Chang stepped closer. "It would be a shame if more accidents occurred. Perhaps at your sister's dance studio, or your parents' home." Sophia's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. "Are you threatening my family, Mr. Chang?" "I'm offering you a choice. The same choice I offered your friend Mr. Blackwood 5 years ago." His smile turned cruel. "He made the smart decision then. I suggest you do the same now." "The problem is," Sophia said calmly, "you're still thinking you're the one with the power here." Chang's expression flickered. "What do you mean?" Sophia gestured to the painting he'd been studying. "Look closer at the pattern. What do you think is code is actually a recording device. Everything you've said in this room has been transmitted to the FBI's Art Crimes Division. They're particularly interested in corporate espionage these days." The color drained from Chang's face. Outside, they could hear commotion in the main gallery. "Your associates are already being detained." Alexander's voice came from the doorway. "It's over, Chang." Chang moved faster than Sophia expected, grabbing her arm. Nobody moves, or she. But Sophia was ready. 5 years of self-defense classes had prepared her for this moment. She twisted out of his grip, using his own momentum to push him off balance. Chang stumbled, knocking into a pedestal. As he fell, federal agents swarmed into the room. "David Chang," an agent announced, "you're under arrest for corporate espionage, extortion, and attempted assault." As Chang was led away in handcuffs, Sophia felt her knees go weak. Alexander was there instantly, supporting her. "You were amazing," he whispered. "We were amazing," she corrected him. Together. The gallery slowly emptied of law enforcement and guests. Sophia's sister Rita hugged her tightly, then tactfully left them alone. Through the windows, they could see Mrs. Wu watching from her restored restaurant, giving them a knowing smile and a thumbs up. "I almost lost you again tonight," Alexander said softly, once they were alone. Sophia turned to face him. "No, you didn't. Because this time we fought together. No more running, no more making decisions for each other." "I was so scared," he admitted, "when he grabbed you." "I know. But I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago." "Neither are you." She touched his face gently. We're stronger now. Wiser. Sophia. Alexander took her hand. These past weeks, working together, facing this threat. I know things can't go back to how they were before. No, they can't, she agreed. But maybe they can be better. Through the gallery windows, the city lights twinkled like stars. The night had been full of danger and fear, but it had also shown them both something important, that love wasn't about protection or control, but about trust and partnership. So, Alexander said, looking around at the gallery that had become their battleground and their victory ground, what happens now? Sophia smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Now we write our own story. Together, 3 months after Chang's arrest, Sophia stood in her gallery, surrounded by white roses and twinkling lights. The space had been transformed once again, but this time not for an exhibition or a trap. Tonight was about new beginnings. Are you sure about this? Rita asked, adjusting Sophia's simple white dress. No traditional wedding gown this time. Sophia had chosen something that made her feel strong and beautiful at the same time. I've never been more sure of anything, Sophia replied, touching the small sketch she'd tucked into her bouquet, one of her old drawings of Alexander from that returned sketchbook. The gallery looked nothing like it had 3 months ago. The investigation boards and surveillance equipment were long gone, replaced by flowers and candles. The walls, usually covered in artwork, now held enlarged photographs chronicling their story, from their first meeting at the charity auction to recent pictures of them rebuilding together. Mrs. Wu bustled in, carrying a box of her famous egg tarts. For good luck, she insisted, placing them on a side table. Though you two make your own luck now. Sophia smiled, remembering how the neighborhood had rallied around them after Chang's arrest. Mrs. Wu's restaurant was thriving again, and the old warehouse across the street was being renovated. A joint project between Sophia's expanding gallery and Alexander's tech company. They were building something new together. 5 minutes, Rita announced, heading out to check on the guests. They'd kept it small this time, just family and close friends gathered in the space that had seen their worst moments and their best. Sophia walked to the window, looking out at the city she loved. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A perfect California evening. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Ready? She smiled, typing back, always. This time, there was no hesitation, no threats lurking in the shadows. When she walked down the makeshift aisle between gallery displays, Alexander was there, waiting. His eyes lit up when he saw her, just like they had that first day at the charity auction. Their vows were simple, honest, and entirely their own. 5 years ago, Alexander began, his voice steady but full of emotion. I thought love meant protecting you at all costs. I was wrong. Love means trusting you to stand beside me, fighting our battles together. You taught me that strength isn't about shielding someone from the world, it's about facing the world as equals. Sophia squeezed his hands, her own voice clear and strong. When you left, I built walls around my heart and called it strength. But real strength was learning to trust again, to risk everything for love again. You came back not to save me, but to be my partner. That's the love I choose. Eyes wide open, hearts fully committed, facing whatever comes our way together. The rings they exchanged were simple gold bands. No diamonds, no flashy stones, just like their new relationship, built on substance rather than show. Anyone who thinks these two should not be joined, the officiant began the traditional words, but Mrs. Wu's loud, "Don't even think about it," from the back made everyone laugh, breaking the tension. Their first kiss as husband and wife felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. The small crowd cheered, Rita wiped away tears, and Mrs. Wu started passing out egg tarts to everyone. Later, during their first dance, Sophia looked around at their transformed gallery. Remember our first dance here? She asked. At that charity event years ago. You were explaining the symbolism in that huge abstract painting, Alexander smiled. I didn't understand a word of it, but I could have listened to you talk forever. And now look at us, she said, building our own abstract masterpiece. The evening flowed like a perfect dream. Friends and family shared stories, some funny, some touching. Rita's toast had everyone laughing and crying at the same time. Even Thomas had sent a kind message wishing them well. As the night wound down, Sophia and Alexander slipped away to the gallery's rooftop terrace. The city spread out below them, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. "No regrets?" Alexander asked, wrapping his arms around her. Sophia turned in his embrace. "Just one. We could have had this years ago if we trusted each other enough to fight together instead of apart." "Maybe we needed those years," he suggested, "to grow, to learn, to become the people who could really do this right." She touched his face gently. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher. She showed me that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about choosing each other every day, through the hard times and the good ones." Below, they could hear their guests leaving, Mrs. Wu directing everyone to take more egg tarts home. The sound of life and love and laughter floated up to their quiet sanctuary. "So," Sophia said, "ready to start our next adventure?" Alexander smiled, that same smile that had first captured her heart years ago. "With you? Always." They stayed on the rooftop a while longer, planning their future between kisses. The gallery would expand, combining art and technology in ways neither of them had imagined before. They'd create spaces for other dreamers, other fighters, other lovers. The city twinkled below them, full of possibilities. They had faced threats and fears, separation and reunion, and emerged stronger. Their love story wasn't perfect. It was better than that. It was real, tested by time and trials, strengthened by trust and understanding. As the last of the guests departed, their voices fading into the night, Sophia and Alexander remained on their rooftop, wrapped in each other's arms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new chances to choose each other. But for now, they had this moment. This perfect, hard-won peace. "I love you," Sophia whispered, her heart full. "I love you too," Alexander replied. "Always have, always will." And this time, they both knew it was a promise they would keep.